The entire game industry in 2017 was really under a microscope for issues of gender discrimination, inappropriate workplace behaviors, things like that, very sort of male dominated industry. And Riot was caught up in a lot of that. And so that kicked off sort of a first cultural transformation to sort of upgrade those processes and those programs that you really need as a grown-up company to make sure that you have a safe, inclusive workplace. We sort of established more concrete values that prioritized inclusivity to really take sort of this crisis that had happened, and how do we make sure that we're then shoring up to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Transformation means many different things in different contexts. For you, what does it mean? How has it shown up?
The ones that I find the most interesting are transformations in culture. So again, the health of your employee base and the way people work together towards that common goal can really make or break a company. Honestly, if you have the best technology and the best product, but your business as people is not functioning well, that can make the difference between whether or not a company succeeds. So that's, to me, I think what I've been closest to in my role as a communicator and in corporate affairs. The company's actually gone through a cultural transformation that I've been, at least, in the last year and a half, been really privileged to be a part of. And a lot of it has to do with the world around us, different expectations that employees have of their employers, and really sort of how do you harness all of that excitement and passion that comes with a young workforce, especially in gaming. So you've got like these really creative people who are thinking up beautiful narratives and that serve, at least in Riot's case, 180 million players per month around the world, so you really need that creative energy in a company. But how do you keep that, but not let that passion and creativity and excitement sort of go down the road where some of those kinds of conversations can be destructive? This is also an employee base, we call them rioters, by the way, who crave and expect transparency, and they want to know the why behind our decisions. And so that gives you a sense of the culture that we have. We've always encouraged rioters to speak up and share their ideas and their diverse perspectives. So if you take, back in 2017, negative sentiment, negative press stories, a prolonged period of public litigation, and then you even take that to 2020, then this sort of shock and fear and isolation of a pandemic, we saw that there were some pretty sort of unhealthy behaviors and misaligned expectations that emerged within our company. And so, we went from being a company that had been about open communication and sharing ideas, and it sort of morphed into call out culture on internal Slack channels. So for anyone who uses Slack, there's a lot of, very easy real-time feedback, but that can quickly turn into unproductive feedback and sort of piling on if people aren't coming to it with the same expectations. We went from being a company that really supported players and local communities, which we still do, but that again evolved into demands for social activism on every single issue, right? Even if they had nothing to do with our core business or our industry or even our core communities. So what that resulted in was, sponsorships being canceled, partnership decisions being challenged very publicly. It was a regular occurrence for leaders to be questioned in very riot-wide channels, 3,500 people on a Slack seeing sort of, why didn't we do this? Why was this decision made? And again, creating sort of fear and demoralization across the company, which wasn't, really going to foster that creativity and that open communication that we wanted at the company and that had existed before. So ultimately, those challenges and those sort of fights and disagreements that were sort of done in very public forums across the company started to sort of distract our teams from our core mission, right? Which is player focus and being focused on our players. So it sort of, again, came to a head and came to a time where we realized mid last year, we have to sort of reshape our culture and reset expectations so that we can actually be the company that we want to be, focus on our players, and really gear up for the next phase of growth.
What we're also seeing is organizations deliberately working on creating a safe environment where all voices can be heard, where people can truly work together to shift it forward.
Yes.
And it feels like what you were saying is you could see that you'd lost some psychological safety, actually. And actually one of the core planks of success in your transformation was going to be deliberately working on an inclusive environment where all voices could be heard.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's a really good point you make, because I think a lot of companies, including ours, we talk about being that place where you can bring your authentic self to work and all voices can be heard. But that's a really delicate balance to strike, because if certain voices are heard much louder than others, it can create that cycle of, hey, I don't want to speak up. I don't necessarily want to, promote my opinion or present this idea. And that was some of the things we were starting to see on our internal company-wide channels. We were starting to see those behaviors crop up. And again, I think everyone knows, and as a company, we know you're free to sort of offer your opinions, but you start to see it just sort of naturally evolve into without any sort of guardrails, naturally evolve into louder voices than others, and that just doesn't always yield the best ideas or represent an entire company. One actual part of what we did was we changed our internal communications channels to be a little bit actually more productive for people who genuinely had questions. So rather than these large open forums that were just, places for people to express themselves to an entire company, we actually created channels that were specific to our pillars, right? So if you have a question about esports, rather than just blasting it out into the open air and expecting our CEO to answer it, there might be our president of esports or one of his SMEs might actually really have a much better answer for you, and you might actually have a much more interesting dialogue and information sharing and feedback loop that way than just having these like large open forums. So we still have open forums, and we did make space for that, but also was just a small change in how we directed those communications, I think really made a difference. And I've been really happy to see sort of the kind of discourse that we're seeing within the company. So no tamping down of creativity or opinions, just funneling it in a way that actually sometimes gets to even better results. I have a theory because I feel like a lot of our younger folks in the in our industries, it doesn't matter if it's, gaming attracts very sort of like young creative people, but you see it, just a whole generation entering the workforce that is used to really getting to know politicians, celebrities, on social media, where there's an intimacy that I think existed that didn't exist before. And I do think that employees expect a little bit of that out of the leaders that they see at work. Now, obviously, people shouldn't become best friends and things like that, but they want to see the human side of you. They want to understand why you're making these decisions and whether it was hard for you or what your considerations were as you thought through something. If you have to make a tough decision, they want to know if it bothered you. Did it sit well with you? And these are all things that I don't think were present, 20 years ago in a workplace when I sort of started out. And I see it a lot more here. I do think it's going to be something that all companies, no matter what industry, will have to really take into account more. It's just that human factor.